I am Elin. 22. The quiet youngest who signs things and keeps the peace. I rent the garden-level suite in my parents' suburban New Jersey house, and my rent written in a notarized lease covers their mortgage. I work days at a cookware brand in Midtown. I carry a badge, a lunch tin, and a little ledger that tracks every dollar I save because savings are the only thing that hush the noise in my head. The hook came at my cousin Aline's graduation party, which my mother, Morris, announced we would host in our backyard without consulting me. She called it a small afternoon thing. By noon there were folding chairs in rows, champagne flutes lined like soldiers, and a rented archway wrapped in lavender garland. HOA notices already sat in our mailbox like thin yellow threats. I was skimming a tray of baked ziti when my mother leaned toward me and said it like a line she had rehearsed in the mirror. If you live under my roof, you pay for my niece's day. 500 will do. Be grateful. She held up an iPad where my bank transfer from last week glowed on the screen. The payment that matched their mortgage almost to the penny. I kept my voice in the calm register I use on customer service calls. I already paid the rent. That is the mortgage. Mom. She clicked her tongue. The ice in her flute clinked like a warning bell. You keep forgetting who owns the deed, she said. Tapping a printout of the title, she had slipped into a rose gold folder, as if paper turned possession into power. Around us. Cousins laughed. Foil balloons drifted against the cedar fence. I was a tenant and a child at the same time. And that double costume never fits. I could have swallowed it. Like always. But humiliation has a weight. Carry it long enough, and your hands do something before your mind blesses it. If this is how parties go, I said, stop hosting them here. The words were plain. The room went still. My mother let out a small, theatrical laugh. Ungrateful, she said. Loud enough for the aunties. You can move out today. We will be fine. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to say something to me. If your family ever turned your rent into their party fund, leave a comment and tell me what happened. I need proof I am not the only one. The thing about a well-staged humiliation is it requires an audience. My mother understands that. She went to the patio speaker and thumbed the volume up. Then she snapped a photo of me holding the tray and posted it to her story with a caption about house help. A winking joke that wasn't a joke. The story traveled fast through our little world. You could see phones lifting like sunflowers. Aline's friends were kind enough to look away. My Aunt Celeste was not. If you can't afford 500, she said, brushing crumbs from her silk dress. Just say so. She smiled a bright, empty smile. In her hand, a pale envelope with Aline's name in gold script. Graduation cards look so light, the expectations inside them are heavy. I finished the sides my mother claimed she would make and set them on the outdoor buffet next to a glass jar full of cutlery and a parsley plant leaning in the heat. The yard smelled like marinara and fresh sod. At and past two. The HOA attorney, Audrey, stopped by in a linen blazer to warn us about parking overflow and noise after 10. Her clipboard made that small dry knock against the gate when she left. The notice would be emailed, she said. Fines could reach 5 figures if there was another unregistered event. I nodded. I am the one who handles emails at home. Anything with a bill finds me. But what they didn't know was, and this is where I ask you to stay with me, there was a lease. A signed, notarized lease in a manila folder in my desk drawer. With my name printed cleanly, and 2 lines highlighted quiet enjoyment and notice of entry. It is amazing how a simple phrase like quiet enjoyment can feel like a prayer. By 2:30, the yard was full. Maris floated table to table like a small mayor. My father, who works away most weeks, kept his head down refilling ice. He is a tall, tired man who can make anything with his hands except boundaries. He found me beside the grill and said, in a voice you could barely hear over the music, you were not wrong. But you cannot speak to her that way. I said, I know. And I meant it. I walked toward my mother to apologize. She did not accept it. She looked at the tray. Not my eyes. The damage is done, she said, straightening a stack of napkins. When are you finding a new place? I nodded like a person being measured for clothes. I excused myself. I brought out the salad tongs. At 3. A cousin connected her phone to our television via AirPlay, so the kids could watch a slideshow of Aileen's photos. What appeared instead, for a thin, bright second, was the HOA email that had just arrived. Alive with boldface unregistered event. Street congestion. Potential fines in the low 5 figures. Someone fumbled the remote. The screen went black. A chorus of awkward laughter rose and fell. But the words had already burned themselves into the room. You cannot unsee the math. There are always family voices. The ones that know exactly where to press. My uncle, a retired contractor named Martin, chewed a toothpick and said, "If your dad makes what he makes, and you live here, what are you even saving for?" It was not a question, it was a jab dressed as a question. My brother did his part. The way brothers do when they believe the youngest will always absorb the blow. "You are 22, he said. Time to stop playing roommate." He had 2 plates of food and no shame. I went inside and stood by the sink with the faucet running so it sounded like rain. I counted to 30 because my therapist once told me that 30 seconds can be the difference between scorched earth and a firm line. When I came back out, a guest had propped my iPad against a pitcher to play music. On the lock screen was the bank app. The monthly rent transfer glowed again in neat digits. Someone said, "Wow." The camera phones rose again. The story of me was writing itself without me. Here is the truth that sounds like a riddle. You can be an adult paying adult bills and still be treated like a child if everyone benefits from pretending you are one. That fiction buys them parties, projects, pretty photos under rented arches. It costs you sleep. I told my mother, calmly, that I would not be paying for this party or the next, that I would not work as staff during events I did not consent to, that if the house was going to be a venue, it would not be mine. Then it will not be yours, she said brightly, as if we were discussing centerpiece choices. Pack tonight. We will manage without your rent. Her voice carried across the tables. The aunties perked up like birds hearing seeds scatter. I do not raise my voice. I wrote a text instead. I wrote to my father, and to myself, and to the part of me that keeps ledgers after today. Rent goes into escrow until the lease is honored. After today, quiet. Enjoyment means quiet. I slid the phone into my pocket and smiled the small smile I use when customers say the cookware warped even though they put it on high heat with no oil. We sang for Aline and clapped at the speech her professor aunt gave about grit. We took photos under the lavender arch. The sun leaned toward the fence. The shadows got longer. The neighbor's dog barked. I stacked plates and wiped the tablecloths and folded chairs one by one until the grass looked like a flattened map. I will explain the trust in the email and the rest soon. This part matters first. It matters that you hear the tone of it, the easy cruelty and the tidy props. The folder. The iPad. The HOA letter blooming on the screen like an omen. It matters that you hear my voice exactly as it sounded when I said the simplest sentence I have ever said to my mother: stop hosting parties at our house. If you have ever been publicly humiliated over money by your own family, leave a comment that says not okay. Tell me what you would have done in that yard with the arch and the cameras and the aunties who love a scene. I grew up in a house where silence was never really silent. It was just the sound of debts being counted in whispers. I was the youngest. And that meant I was both invisible and indispensable. Invisible when praise was handed out. Indispensable when bills came due. My mother had a habit of folding unpaid notices into an old shoebox, tucking them under her bed like secrets. I found that box once when I was 12, the lid barely closed over electricity bills, tuition slips, even grocery receipts that had been left too long. By the time I was 15, I was the one running errands, covering for late fees, even lending bits of my part-time pay to keep the lights on. The words were always the same: we'll pay you back. They never did. I learned early that family debts do not carry interest. They carry expectation. When I started working full-time, I thought maybe it would change. My paycheck was modest but steady, and I liked watching the savings ledger grow. Neat lines in a little black notebook. Yet almost as soon as the ink dried, there would be another call. Another ask. Your brother's car broke down. Your cousin needs books. The house needs repairs. It became a rhythm. The way other families schedule birthdays. I did not complain out loud. Instead, I began my own quiet archive. In a metal folder with a sliding clasp, I placed copies of every transfer, every receipt, every proof that my money had gone where they insisted. I was not sure why I kept them, maybe to remind myself I was not imagining it. Or maybe I knew even then that a day would come when memory would not be enough. Years later, when I signed the papers for a condominium worth $1.2 million, it felt like the first real thing that belonged to me. The mortgage was heavy, but I could carry it. I had worked through weekends, skipped vacations, and saved until my hands shook, signing the down payment. For one clear moment, standing in the empty living room, with keys warm in my palm, I believed no one could take it away. I was wrong. The very week I moved in, family text threads lit up like warning sirens. Beautiful place. One cousin wrote, perfect for holidays. My mother sent a message in all caps. OUR family finally has something nice. I read it 3 times. Our. As if the deed had been split invisibly across generations without my consent. The first open betrayal came at a Sunday dinner. We were gathered around my aunt's oak table. Plates heavy with roast chicken. Conversation swelled. Dipped. And then my cousin scrolled through her phone. Lips curling. Listen to this, she said, reading aloud from a group chat I had not been invited to. Just keep pushing, she's too soft to say no. A few more years and she'll cover everything. The room laughed like it was a joke. I kept chewing, the salt burning my tongue. Later that evening, while clearing plates, my mother set down her wineglass and said it as casually as if she were offering dessert. Why don't you add your sister's name to the condo deed? That way, there won't be disputes later. She reached for a napkin, dabbing her lips, as though legal ownership was just another course at the table. My hands froze on the cutlery. I looked at her, then at the folder I had carried in my bag that day. The one with my mortgage contract. My notarized lease. The proofs of payment that tied me to that home. I did not pull it out. Not yet. Instead, I smiled the polite, practice smile that keeps dinners from burning down. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened the folder and ran my fingers over the embossed bank seal. Proof. Waiting. A reminder that this life was mine. Bought with hours they never saw. Sacrifices they never named. Still, the echo of their laughter carried into my sleep. Here is something I have learned. Betrayal rarely announces itself with shouting. Sometimes it is a whisper over roasted chicken, a cousin's smirk while reading a message, a mother's offhand suggestion to sign away what you have built. The first crack is small, but once you see it, you cannot unsee it. If you have ever realized too late that your family saw you as a wallet and not as a person, share your story in the comments. I want to know I am not the only one. The first time it happened in my own place, I told myself it was a misunderstanding. My mother insisted on hosting a family party in my condominium, my $1.2 million home that I was still paying off every month. It will just be a small thing, she said, waving a manicured hand. But small turned into more than 100 guests. Cars spilling down the street. A rented archway wedged against the entryway like I was running a banquet hall. I stood by the kitchen island, a tray of appetizers balanced in my arms, and felt like a stranger in my own home. My name was on the deed, but their voices filled every corner. Cousins lounged on my leather sofa, wine glasses sweating on the marble countertop I had saved for. My brother clapped me on the shoulder as if I were staff. Grab more ice. Will you, Mom says? The cooler is low. The humiliation was subtle at first. Then Bolt, my mother, in a dress bright enough to catch every eye, raised her glass and declared, "We are so proud to have this space for the family. It is really everyone's home." The room applauded. Someone whistled. I felt the words slide under my skin like splinters. Everyone's home. The mortgage was mine alone. The overtime hours were mine. The sleepless nights. The ramen dinners. The train rides to work. Those belonged to me. Yet in that instant, ownership evaporated. I whispered to my father, hoping for quiet support. He adjusted his tie, looked at the floor, and murmured, "Just let it go. It keeps the peace." But peace for whom I kept stacking plates, carrying trays, moving through my own living room like a hired hand. Then came the blow that still stings when I think of it. Midway through the evening, as the music dipped and the chatter lulled, my mother tapped her glass for silence. She smiled at the crowd. "Next year, we will celebrate even bigger. By then, my daughter will have sold this condo to help her sister with her debts." Laughter rippled. Phones lifted. A video was recorded, my stunned face framed under the chandelier I had chosen after weeks of searching. That clip spread before the night was over. Friends sent me links to TikTok and Instagram. My mother's words echoing, "She will sell this condo." I felt stripped bare in front of neighbors, colleagues, strangers. Not a homeowner, not a professional, just the youngest child. The bank account with a face. I wanted to shout, but shouting would have given them another performance to replay. Instead, I clenched the serving tongs until my knuckles ached and said nothing. My silence was its own humiliation. A stage they had built for me without asking. But what they did not know was that I had already spoken to a lawyer. I had copies of the deed, the mortgage, the lease. I had the folder that never left my desk drawer. And I had the patience to wait until the right moment. Here's the truth. Families can cut you open in ways strangers never will. A stranger may mock your clothes, your job, your choices. Family mocks your worth. And they do it with a smile. In public. Under the glow of string lights at a party you never agreed to host. That night, as the guests danced and laughed in my living room, I wrote myself a note on the back of a paper napkin, "Never again." I folded it, slipped it into my pocket, and cleared the plates. If your family ever turned your own house into their stage, if they ever used your sacrifice as a punchline, tell me what you would have done, because I need to know I am not the only one. I moved through the week like a shadow, polite at work, quiet at home, but inside something had shifted. Humiliation has a half-life. It lingers long after the crowd has gone home. My mother's voice about selling the condo played in my head while I washed dishes, while I commuted on the train, while I brushed my teeth. I knew I could not erase it, but I could prepare. So I began gathering every piece of paper I had once saved out of habit. The folder in my desk drawer grew heavier with proof, the mortgage contract with my signature pressed firm beside the bank seal, receipts from years of payments, even the notarized lease agreement that stated clearly my rights to quiet enjoyment. Each sheet of paper was a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. I also collected the things they did not realize I had. Text messages where my sister bragged to her friends that she would push me into sharing the condo because I'm too scared to say no. A voice message from my mother, sent in a rush one morning, reminding me to remember who owns the deed even though she knew she did not. And then the email, a thread forwarded to me by mistake where my sister confessed to a friend, "The place isn't mine. But if we pressure enough, she'll break." I printed it, slipped it into a clear sleeve, and added it to the folder. Proof of intent. Proof of betrayal. When I met with the lawyer, a woman named Callahan who kept her hair clipped back and her words clipped shorter, she did not look surprised. "This is common," she said, flipping through the folder. "Adult children paying rent. Family crossing boundaries. You have every right to stop it." She looked up at me. "The question is whether you want to stop it quietly or publicly." I said nothing for a moment. I thought of the clip of my mother's speech still floating online. Strangers laughing in comments about selling a condo. Quiet had never been offered to me. Callahan slid a paper across the desk. We can issue a cease and desist regarding unauthorized use of your property for large gatherings. We can escrow your rent payments until the terms of the lease are honored. And we can prepare for more, if necessary. Her voice softened. But this part matters. You'll need to decide how much family you are willing to lose. I folded the paper, placed it in the folder. My hands were steady. They decided that already? I said. That night, I stood in the living room, lights low, and read the documents aloud as if rehearsing for an audience. Deed, lease, mortgage, email. Ich Wort steadied me. Each word reminded me that I was not a guest in my own life. But I did not reveal any of it yet. I smiled through another dinner. I answered my mother's texts with short replies. I even agreed when she hinted at hosting another event. They thought I had folded. They thought humiliation had clipped my wings. What they didn't know was that I was building a stage of my own. I will tell you soon about the moment when everything came to light: the rehearsal, the projection, the silence that followed. But for now, remember, this revenge does not begin with shouting. It begins with a folder, a key desk, and the patience to wait until every eye is watching. If you have ever gathered proof against the people who should have protected you, tell me, did you use it? Or did you keep it locked away? It was my cousin's wedding rehearsal. A polished evening in a rented hall with white linens and a projector waiting to play a slideshow of childhood photos. I had agreed to come, though every part of me bristled. My mother had been hinting all week that our home would soon host a series of gatherings again. I kept my folder tucked beneath my arm as though it were a clutch purse. Inside lay every piece of paper that said the truth. The room smelled of candle wax and catered pasta. Families mingled, glasses of wine in hand, laughter rising in waves. My mother floated among them, cheeks bright with approval. When she saw me arrive, she leaned in close and whispered, "Do not embarrass us tonight. Remember, this family stands together." Her smile stayed fixed, as if even threats were rehearsed lines. I chose a seat near the back, my folder resting on my lap. The slideshow began. Photos of the bride and groom flashing on the wall, school portraits, summer vacations, awkward prom shots. Applause and laughter filled the hall. Then the screen flickered, stalled, and in the pause I saw my chance. I walked to the front, my steps slow, deliberate. "Before we continue," I said, holding up the folder, "there are things this family needs to see." The room quieted. Forks clinked against plates and then stopped. My mother hissed my name under her breath. But I kept going. I placed the lease agreement on the projector, the words enlarging on the screen: tenant's right to quiet enjoyment. Murmurs rippled. I flipped to the mortgage, my name bold beside the bank seal. "This condo you call ours?" I said, my voice steady, "is mine, paid for with my hours, my money, my work." Then I revealed the email, the one where my sister admitted the condo was not hers but planned to pressure me until I gave in. The words loomed large. Undeniable. Her name stamped at the bottom. Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a glass. My sister's face went pale, her mouth open but no sound emerging. Finally, I pressed play on the short video clip my mother at the last party, declaring I would sell the condo for my sister's debts. Her voice echoed through the hall, laughter from that night replaying like a cruel chorus. Now, instead of clapping, the guests sat in silence, eyes darting between me and my family. My mother tried to laugh it off, waving her hand. "She exaggerates. It was a joke." But jokes do not come with deeds, contracts, and notarized signatures. I stood taller, folding the papers back into the folder. "You turned my home into your stage. You treated me like a servant in my own living room. And you told the world I would give up everything I worked for? Tonight, I return the performance. Only now. The audience sees the truth. The silence was heavy. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. The bride's family looked uncomfortable, whispering among themselves. My Aunt Celeste tried to stand, then sat back down. Cheeks flushed. My mother's smile cracked. The performance slipping. I did not wait for applause or rebuttal. I simply walked back to my seat, placed the folder beside me, and let the silence linger. They had used parties and public scenes to shame me. Now I had returned the favor. But the real twist came a week later, when the lawyer called with news that changed everything. If your family ever forced you to choose between silence and exposure, tell me, would you have stood up in that hall? Or would you have stayed seated and swallowed the shame? A week after that rehearsal, my phone buzzed with a call from Callahan. Milavier. I was standing at the kitchen counter with a mug of cold coffee, replaying the silence of that night in my head. We filed the notice, she said briskly. Your payments will be placed into escrow until your rights are honored. They cannot touch your money. And they cannot use your condo without written consent. It is done. Her voice was steady, professional. But to me it sounded like freedom. For the first time in years. My rent, my own hard-earned rent, was not vanishing into their endless projects. Their parties. Their lavender arches. It was sitting in a safe account. Untouched. Waiting for resolution. That same day, my grandmother, Vera, called me over to her house. She had always been quiet during family gatherings, her hands folded, her gaze sharp. When I arrived, she was sitting at the dining table with a leather-bound binder open in front of her. Sit, she said, pushing a plate of snickerdoodles toward me. Inside the binder was the trust, pages of neat legal language, paragraphs highlighted in yellow. I saw what they did to you, she said, her voice low but firm. I have watched for years. Enough is enough. She tapped the page. This is yours now. A trust that will transfer directly to you, a sum sufficient to cover a down payment on another home, or to start your own business. The only condition is simple: no contact with those who exploited you, at least for 90 days. I felt my throat tighten. For once, the betrayal had birthed something else: protection. My grandmother had seen the cracks long before I did, and now she had built a wall that my mother could not scale. When I returned to my condo, I found voicemails waiting. My mother's voice sometimes sobbing, sometimes shrill pleading one minute and demanding the next. We are family. Families share. You cannot freeze us out like this. My brother added his own message. Angry. Accusing me of tearing the family apart. But by then, the decision was no longer mine alone. The lease was in force, the escrow account untouchable, and the trust waiting like a sealed letter. I spent the next weeks moving quietly, boxing up items, labeling drawers. I told my father I was leaving soon. He sighed head, shoulders heavy, and said, "Do what you need to do." I should have spoken sooner. It was the closest to an apology I would ever hear. When moving day came, a friend with a truck helped me carry my furniture out. My mother stood on the lawn, shouting, demanding I leave the appliances, the sofa, even the dining table. I kept walking, each step lighter than the last. That night, in my grandmother's spare bedroom, I opened my ledger and wrote a new line: "Freedom begins here." I thought about the parties, the humiliations, the laughter at my expense. And I thought about the faces in that rehearsal hall when the truth shone bright on the projector. Betrayal had tried to make me small, but preparation had given me the stage. If you believe I made the right choice cutting ties, placing money into escrow, and stepping into freedom, comment right. And if you know a better way to face family betrayal while staying within the law, share your idea. I will read every word. Living under my grandmother's roof was nothing like living under my parents'. The house was quiet in the way old houses are, with floorboards that creaked and a clock that chimed on the hour. No shouting. No demands for money. No sudden knocks on the bedroom door. Just key it. At night, I sat at her kitchen table with tea and my ledger. The numbers finally stable. She would ask me about work, about books, about the news. Ordinary questions. The kind no one in my family ever bothered with. I realized how hungry I had been for that kind of attention. The simple kind that says I see you as a person, not a paycheck. Meanwhile, the messages from my mother kept coming. First it was crying, then anger, then guilt. How could you do this to us? We raised you. Your grandmother poisoned you against us. My brother chimed in, demanding I come back and fix the mess. But the truth was simple, there was nothing to fix. I had been paying for their lifestyle. And now I was not. One evening, my grandmother opened her laptop and showed me the news. A clip from the wedding rehearsal had surfaced online, edited by some guest into a short video. The caption read, "When your family tries to steal your house and you shut them down with receipts." It had spread quickly, comments pouring in from strangers who understood too well. Some called it justice. Some called it sad. But nearly all called it familiar. I read those comments late into the night. People wrote about siblings who drained savings, parents who signed loans in their children's names, cousins who expected endless handouts. Betrayal, it seemed, was universal. For the first time, I felt less alone. I began posting myself. Not names. Not faces, just lessons. How to protect your finances. How to keep records. How to say no without apology. The posts gained traction. A small following grew. People messaged me privately with their own stories. "Thank you," they wrote. I thought I was the only one. In the midst of that, my father reached out quietly. A single text, "I am sorry. I should have stopped it years ago." He did not call. He did not explain. But I saved the message. Proof that even silence can bend. Eventually. Still, I knew reconciliation was not what I needed. What I needed was distance. And I had it now. I applied for a new lease. A studio apartment, small but sunlit. Paid for, not with fear but with my own salary and, soon, with the trust my grandmother had placed in my name, packing my things again. I felt no bitterness. Just a clean sort of grief. Like sweeping dust from a room before painting the walls. Families can wound. But they can also teach. Mine had taught me the value of boundaries. And that was something worth keeping. If you have ever built a new life away from the very people who should have sheltered you, tell me, was it peace you found? Or just another kind of loneliness? The day I signed the lease for my new studio apartment, the air felt lighter. It was a modest place. One room. Wide windows facing the street. Hardwood floors scuffed from years of other tenants. But every inch of it was mine. No voices telling me what I owed. No sudden parties announced without my consent. No one waiting to turn my savings into centerpieces and balloons. Moving in was simple. A mattress. A table. A few boxes of books. And the folder that had carried me through months of battle. I placed that folder on the top shelf of the closet. Not out of fear, but as a reminder, proof that I had survived and chosen differently. My grandmother visited, bringing a potted plant for the windowsill. "Every new home needs something living," she said, patting the soil with her thin fingers. She stayed for tea, looked around, and smiled. "It's small, but it breathes peace." I believed her. The calls from my mother eventually slowed. First daily, then weekly, then silence. My brother sent one last message, "You'll regret this." But regret did not come. What came instead was space. Space to work late without dread. To cook dinner without hearing arguments in the next room. To sleep, knowing no one would pound on the door demanding more. One evening, I posted the final part of my story online. I did not use names, but I told the truth about paying the mortgage while being treated like a child. About the parties that turned my home into their stage. About the showdown with receipts and contracts. The post spread fast. Thousands read it. Shared it. Added their own experiences. The words I saw again and again were the same. You are not alone. And that, more than the trust fund, more than the escrowed rent, more than the studio apartment, was the real inheritance. The knowledge that betrayal is not the end, that you can walk away. And walking away is sometimes the bravest revenge. I do not know what future waits for me. Maybe I will buy another home. Maybe I will start a business with the funds my grandmother secured. Maybe I will just enjoy this season of quiet. Tea by the window. Ledger balanced. Keys jingling in my own pocket. But I know one thing: the chapter where I was their servant is closed. So I leave you with this: if you think I made the right choice going no contact, placing money into escrow, and stepping into freedom, comment right. And if you have a better idea, one that turns betrayal into strength, share it below. I am listening.